I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on the Spotlight Network, we're diving into the witty and heartfelt world of Robert Robert Isenberg with his book, Why Men Are Suspicious of Yoga. Some funny stories and not so funny. From laugh out loud tales about roast beef sandwiches in New York City to deeply moving reflections on family, Robert's storytelling is both hilarious and thought provoking. If you love humor mixed with life lessons, this is a book you'll want to pick up. We're delighted to
Thank
have
you
this
so
very
much.
talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Atticus Publishing for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below the interview. And be sure to download the Spotlight Network TV app, streaming on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire TV. Robert, great to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me so much.
Let me start out with the question, why men are suspicious of yoga? Why are they?
Well, my wife is a yoga teacher. She was for 35 years. And you might say that that's why I entitled the book as such. She was not happy with the title, and she was not happy with my lack of attendance. There's a story in there about, she says, when will you be coming to one of my classes? And I say, soon. And she says, please give me the definition of soon.
Yeah.
So yeah, so there is a story, one story in there about why men are suspicious of yoga because I did attend, and the result is the story.
Exactly, exactly. It's tough for us guys to be in yoga. We're not as flexible. Embarrassing things happen. I don't think it's really a great pursuit for most men. I know not for me. I tried once and I made it for about 5 minutes into the class and I left. I was like, okay, this is
The
for
word
somebody else.
flexible, yeah, that
Amazing.
resonates.
Exactly. Now, your story about the roast beef sandwiches is a pretty cool one because it was pretty innovative as well. Tell us about that.
Well, actually, it's more prominent in the book Wham Bam, New York City in the Roaring '60s.
Yeah.
And the roast beef sandwiches came about because I moved from Boston to New York. My company that I was working for in Boston moved, and they asked me to come. And I was not happy with the job. I was not happy with my pay, but I really was in New York for a short time. And I said, wow, what a city. So much
Mhm.
is happening. And I lived in the upper 80s when I first moved there. And there were so many young people. And I knew that young people don't like to cook. They're busy going out, they're busy
Yeah.
doing a million other things. So I came up with this idea to make roast beef sandwiches in my apartment and have them delivered. And I had a bunch of friends, girls who helped me with the delivery. And so started Robert's fairly famous roast beef sandwiches. And one night, after about a month of doing this, I got a call for 65 sandwiches. I had maybe enough to make 18 or 20, but it was a
Amazing.
bar. And this was 1964.
Hmm.
And single bars were just starting to happen. There was no, now they, there are probably hundreds of them all over the country, probably thousands. That time there were maybe two or three,
Right.
1964. And it was a place called Lloyd's, named after the actor Lloyd.
Mhm.
And I went down there and I met the manager. And I said, I've only got 20 sandwiches or 18, whatever I had. And he said, well, whatever, leave them here. And I said, I'm looking in your kitchen and it looks really quite prepared for, a lot of people. He said,
Yeah.
I cannot keep a cook. I said, well, you're looking at one. And so I started at Lloyd's. I would go in there after my job. I'd go in there about 5 o'clock at night and I'd start making these sandwiches. And it turned into a pretty big thing. And that's what Wham Bam New York City is partially about. It's basically about me moving to New York with very little confidence.
Mhm.
Perhaps you might even say very self-effacing. And I had not accomplished much in my life. I was 23 and I was not happy with my history and in just every respect. I went to a very good school, but I didn't do that well at it. and I went to a decent college and the same results. So I was coming in um, not with not good feelings, and so New York City helped me change and
Mhm.
become, confident, which is such an important word.
Yeah,
And confidence gives you courage, and you can't take that away. That's just about the most important thing a person can have. And
exactly.
that's what enabled me to write the two books. Uh,
Wonderful.
yeah.
As Frank Sinatra sings, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. New York, New York, right?
Well, there was so much happening. This was, as I say, 1964, and it was exploding.
Yeah.
The pill came along, women changed their outlook. Uh, the groups therapy started, so many different things that never existed before. The
Yeah.
music changed. Up
Hmm.
until then, it was Frank Sinatra, Victor Moan,
Hmm.
Tony Bennett. All of a sudden, it was young people
Yeah.
producing their own songs and becoming, tremendous hits. Everything changed. The movies changed. And that's what I would say. And here I was in the middle of this change, like being in the middle of a hurricane, and you
Yeah.
better either go with it or get swept away. And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Yeah. It was an exciting era, no doubt. And like you said, a lot of change in society, a lot of change in culture, an amazing time. What's your favorite story in the book that you share with the readers?
Um, that's a hard question. I've never been asked that question before. Um,
It's like choosing among children, I know, because you love them all and they all have a special place.
well,
You write about your brother in the book as well, right?
yeah, that's an important story to me. Um, yeah, that's comes up early. And then the story after I talk about my brother and our relationship when I got born that he had no use for me. And I grew up in a family of seven. And
Mhm.
so when he was born, he was the youngest of six, and everybody doted over him.
Yeah.
Then along came me 5.5 years later, and he was not happy.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
um, right after that story, I wrote a story that a lot of people have commented on, and it's learning how to just watch.
Mm,
And that's a story about my brother who's really passing away, and there's
mm,
nothing I can do. I can't help him. I'm just standing there trying to say the right thing, and there's no way to say the right thing. And so I wouldn't call that my favorite because it's sad,
right.
but
It's
it's
important.
important.
Yeah,
Yeah,
without
yeah.
a
So
doubt.
it's why I first wrote the book, uh, basically as a humorous book.
Mhm.
And I love to see people laugh. I love to make people laugh because,
Yeah,
I perform too. And I perform a lot of these stories. And nothing pleases me more than watching smiles on people's
yeah.
faces and laughter. But after I wrote the book and it was out for about a year or two, I decided, my humor, not necessarily everybody else's humor. It's a
Mm,
very subjective word. So I revised the book, and I put in these seven stories that people reflect upon, they take seriously, and it's really made a huge change in the book, in the sales of the book.
mm.
Yeah, so I'm very happy about what I did.
Yeah,
For once, I did the right thing.
exactly, exactly. Tell me about your experiences selling encyclopedias. Now, that's a occupation from the past. They don't even have encyclopedias anymore, I don't think. I think it's all Wikipedia. But you were going door to door and you had very little luck, as I understand it.
Yeah, no, I was probably 16.
Wow.
And I had never sold anything before. And of course, they came out with that ad to sell encyclopedias, and I was pretty excited about selling a product.
Mm,
And I thought it was not only exciting to sell a product, I thought it was a product that really could do some people some good if they
mm.
had the ambition enough to open those books.
Exactly.
Read them. But it was, an experience and meeting people and knocking on doors. And can you imagine doing that today?
No, you can't even telephone anybody today. You have to text to say you're going to telephone and then telephone to say I might be in, knocking on the door, stopping by, unexpected company, all of that's gone now. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and a lot of the people were very kind to me. they'd invite me in, and they'd let me say my whole spiel,
Yeah.
and and to see, and they'd make comments. You could do this, you could say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they saw this young guy trying to make a living at this.
And it was tough. It was also an era where people did not have a lot of money. I mean, we had, salesmen come to our door, and my mom would listen to what they had to say, whether it was a Kirby vacuum cleaner or World Book encyclopedia. And we just didn't have the money. They can talk and they can be as charming as they want. We just don't have the money to buy it, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it was actually for those days, it was pretty serious money. I can't remember what the price was, but I think it was in the neighborhood of a couple $100.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
was a lot of money then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's still a lot of money.
It is. It is. What was it like turning these stories into a stage performance? You do that, right?
Yeah, I do. I did a lot of that when I was younger. I performed in so many different places, temples, churches, Rotary clubs, um, really probably about 15 to 20 places. And I performed almost every week because I met this incredible character. I took a class in Cambridge, Mass, on storytelling and performing it. And
Hmm.
when I got done with the class, I said, "What are you going to do with this?" So the teacher said, "You go across the street. There's a divinity school across the street, and on the third floor, there's a Afro-American named Brother Blue,
Hmm.
and you go there and you tell him you want to do stories." Well, I came in, and Brother Blue came out. I heard people telling stories in the background. Brother Blue came out, and he was this tall, very handsome Afro-American, and he looked down at me. That time I was 5'8" before I shrunk. And he looked down at me and he said, "What is your name?" And I said, "It's Robert," very quietly, because I was totally intimidated. And he
Hmm.
looked down at me and he went like this: "From now on, your name is robear." And so in the storytelling world, when I performed, I became robear. I still perform a little bit. I performed in a church about 6 months ago, and it was fabulous. There were about 200 people there, and the audience was as good as it gets. I only remember one audience being so terrific, and they came up to me afterwards. They talked about the story. It's a story in the book, which I changed slightly to tell it. It's called This Old House,
Mm.
and basically the sum and substance of it is my wife and I ended up buying a house in Newburyport, Mass.
Mhm.
Now, we've been living in New York City in a wonderful apartment that I just loved. But she
Mhm.
wakes me up one morning and she says, "We have to find another apartment." And I say, "Why?" She says, "Because we have a dog and a baby and the place is too small." And every time the dog barks, the baby wakes up. We
Uh,
need a little bit more room. I said, "We're living in a wonderful apartment on the east side, paying very little rent." I said, "Any other apartment in New York City, the price is going to be crazy." So then we go, I said, "Well, we can go out to the burbs." And that would be New Jersey and Long Island. And she said, "Why?" I said, "Well, first of all, the diners out there are phenomenal. They have every food imagined.
that's
You
true.
can't, and desserts, everything. And it's all
Exactly.
on the counter where you can see it."
Yeah.
She said, "Well, what other reason?" I said, "Because you're going to hear their accents, and that's how our kids are going to grow up speaking."
They're going to talk like Long Island is. They're going to.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, so the next step was to try Boston again, to go back from New York City, because my dad had an apartment there we could stay in while we were looking for a house. So we went up to Newburyport, Mass,
Mhm.
and the prices were phenomenal because this was again the 60s. And
Mm.
the houses were amazing,
Wow.
gorgeous, just beautiful. Well, the real estate agent, who we really respected the way he dressed, and best of all, he had a New England accent, said, "I'm going to take you to the oldest house in Newburyport," which he did. And I said, "Who lived here before?" Because it was empty. He said, "Wild cats," but he says, "You can get them cleaned up." And
Mm.
there was 6 fireplaces,
Wow.
beam ceilings, patina in the wood. It was amazing. But the work that would be entailed
Mm.
was way, and I had a job. I said to my wife, I said, we can't even consider this. I looked at her face. She had fallen in love with the house.
So that's where you wound up moving.
Yeah, that's how we wound
Amazing.
up.
It's a
Yeah.
great story. It's a heartwarming story. And again, very, very uh, emblematic of that era, I think, the fact that there were affordable houses in Newbury, Massachusetts. I think they're probably $1 million and up nowadays, particularly one with 6 fireplaces, right?
I remember correctly, we paid 20,000 for the house. I
Amazing.
would say that house today is probably over $1 million.
I'm sure. I'm
Yeah,
sure. These
yeah.
stories are amazing. You'll find more of them, folks, in Robert's terrific book, Why Men Are Suspicious of Yoga. Some funny stories and some not so funny. From
Well,
Laugh Out, what's that?
I'll add one thing too about the house
Mhm.
and what she says, which it breaks up the audience. Because when we were in New York one morning, she woke me up and she said, "We need a shelf in the kitchen." And I say, "Why?" She says, "Well, to put things on." I
That's a
said, "Well,
great line.
people in New York City don't do things like that. Everything gets delivered." She says, "It's a hardware store. It tells me where it is. You go there, and they'll tell you exactly what to do," which I did. And I put up the shelf. And so to go back to the sold house, we're in this house in Newburyport. And I said, "We can't possibly consider this. Do you imagine mountain of work?" And she looks at me and she said, "We put up a shelf."
There you go.
And the audience just goes nuts over that.
That's great. That's great. Wonderful stories. More like this in the book, Why Men Are Suspicious of Yoga. Some funny stories and some not so funny. Written by Robert Isenberg. Highly recommended. Go see one of his shows if you're in the Massachusetts area. Or, of course, buy this book. The links are below the interview. Robert, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you so much for the wonderful interview.
I appreciate it, your time. I had a great time speaking with you. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.
Okay.